Today we're going to be looking at removing the defender and how this can help you in a game. So let's get started with the first puzzle. So when looking at any tactics, you want to see your active pieces. So here we have a rook on c4, a rook on d6, and a knight on h4. While white has 2 rooks and 2 knights. So in a way they are at an advantage here. We do have an extra bishop, but this bishop is blocked by its own pawn, so we can't really do much here. Now when we're looking at specifically removing the defender, we want to see what pieces are kind of chained together. For example, this rook is attacking this knight, but this pawn is defending the knight. So like this knight and this pawn are kind of chained together. So here, another example of this is like this rook and this knight. You're attacking the rook, and the knight is defending the rook. And my knight is attacking this knight, and the pawn is defending this knight. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration, especially when we look at attacking pieces and removing the defender in tactical positions. So let's rule out a couple of the possibilities. So rook takes on c3, like we can't really do much about this because they have b takes on c3, and we can't really remove this defender. Here, knight takes g2, similar reason to rook takes c3, we can't really remove the king from the position because wherever it moves, it's still defending the pawn on g2, so we can't really do much about that. Knight takes on f3, so we are attacking the knight, but the pawn is right here, so this is not really doing much. We can't really move the pawn away from the position, so attacking the knight doesn't work either. We have rook takes on d5, and here there are 2 defenders, so even if you remove a piece, another defender will be defending the pawn at all times. Now here, when we look at rook takes on d4, this knight is defending the rook. But you have another knight here that's attacking this knight. So if you grab the knight on f3, you're giving check at the same time. So they are forced to either move the king or take the knight back. So if I go knight takes on f3, they take the knight back, then I can just go rook takes on d4. So here you can see how we remove the defender of the knight. So let's see another example of this. So here we look at all of the active pieces. Once again, we have our queen, our bishop, our other bishop, and these rooks will eventually get active as well, so it's important to take those into consideration. White has their knight, their rook, their bishop, their queen, and their other rook. So here it is a pretty equal position, but we do have a tactic here. So we can see that our bishop is being attacked, so I'm assuming something will have to do with this bishop being attacked. And here we can see that we're attacking this rook as well as this knight at the same time. This knight is defending this rook. So if we go bishop takes on f3, you can see that we're attacking the queen and we're attacking the rook. And both of them are kind of hanging pieces. So if we take the knight, we're removing this defender of the rook as well as attacking the queen at the same time. So if they prioritize the points of the pieces, they will want to defend their queen. So what they will do is that they will either take back with their bishop or they'll take back with their queen. While this rook will be left hanging because we remove the defender of the piece. So if we do bishop takes on f3, after bishop takes back, we get this rook for free. So now here we have another example of this. So here we can see like this queen is multitasking. It is defending this bishop and defending this rook at the same time. And when we look at our active pieces, we see our queen, our bishop, and our rook. We can see that this rook is attacking this bishop and this queen is attacking this rook. So now you can see that there's a chain of pieces. You have this rook, this queen, this rook, this bishop, and this queen kind of in a chain. So if this queen moves out of this file, then we win the rook. And if this queen moves out of these couple of squares, then we win the bishop. So the idea here is to move this queen out of this file so we can win the rook, or move this queen away from this bishop so we can win the bishop. So here when looking at the value of pieces, we really want to win the rook more than the bishop. And if we go queen takes on d4, and if the queen takes back, then we do win the bishop. But here we're sacrificing our queen for a rook and a bishop. So that's not really the best option here. On the other hand, we can go rook takes on e2, and once the queen takes back on e2, we have this free rook, and now we're winning in exchange. So rook takes on e2 is the correct move. So it's really important to look for those chain of pieces and to see which pieces you want to sacrifice in order to remove the defender. So here we have another example of this. There is a chain of pieces. So let's look at our active pieces. We have our bishop, we have our queen, and we have our knight. And they also have their bishop, their queen, and their knight. So once again, this queen is multitasking. It's defending this bishop and defending this knight at the same time. So now let's see which one we have to take. So here the chain of pieces that we see here is the queen, the bishop, white's bishop, white's queen, and white's knight. They are all connected in some way. So here, if we go bishop takes on d6, white can go bishop takes our queen, then we take their queen, and then they take our bishop. So we had an equal trade of pieces, but that is not what we're looking for here. Instead, if we go bishop takes on d2, the queen is forced to take on d2, and then we can trade queens, then king takes back, and then we can go king takes on d6, winning the knight. And we did this by removing the defender of the knight. So the correct move is bishop takes on d2. After queen takes, we trade the queens, and then we grab the knight on d6. So now let's move on to our final puzzle. So now we look at the multitaskers again. So the point is to look at the pieces that are multitasking and find a chain of pieces. So here we look at our active pieces. We have our queen, our rook, and our bishop. While they have their queen, their two rooks, their knight, and their bishop. So they are up a piece here. So let's see what we want to do. So you can see that the chain of pieces here is this rook, this queen, this rook, and this rook. They're all connected to each other in some way. This rook is defending the queen as well as defending the rook at the same time. So this rook is multitasking. So the idea here would be removing this rook from the position, or removing this rook from this chain. So what we can do here is we have two options once again. We can take the queen, and after the rook takes back, we can go rook takes on e1 and win the rook. Or we can go rook takes on e1, the rook takes back, and then we go queen takes on c5 and win the queen for a rook. So let's look at both these options. Let's start off with queen takes c5. So if queen takes c5, white has two options. So one is take the queen back, and the other one is take the rook on e8 with check. So if I go queen takes on c5, then rook takes back on e8, then my rook is forced to take back this rook because we're in check. So after rook takes back, then white can go rook takes on c5, so that won't be correct, it won't work. So now let's look at our other option, rook takes on e1 check. So since it's a check, the king either has to move or the rook takes back the rook. So if I go rook takes on e1 and the king just moves, then I just grab the queen, and of course white would take the queen back and we would be up a rook. So their other option is to go rook takes back on e1, and then if they go rook takes back on e1, I win the queen on c5. So that's why rook takes on e1 is correct.